Today's show on Videoguys Live is all about tech tips for keeping your production gear updated. We're going to talk about why you need to at least know and understand what firmware is and what firmware upgrades are, but also when and when you shouldn't be updating it, and also how to do it. We're going to show you via demos the most popular ones that we get here at Videoguys in terms of firmware updates. So without further ado, let's roll the bump and let's get on with the show. Hello everybody, this is Atomos. I'm a video production specialist here at Videoguys. No Gary today, unfortunately, but this is more of a techie show, so it makes sense. I am the main tech guy here, at least in our offices here at Videoguys. So thus it makes sense why I should host today's show. Chances are, if you've been following us for a while, you've seen me before, or even possibly talked to us on the phone. Today we're going to be talking about tech tips for keeping your production gear updated. I'm going to talk to you about why you should update the firmware on your gear, why you shouldn't update the firmware on your gear in some cases, and I'm also going to demo several products of what the process is for updating the firmware on that. So let's actually get on with the show. So I'm going to go into some tech tips first and foremost. So to start off, I want to say that all equipment should be set up and tested a few days before the production. Don't wait until 12 hours or even 24 hours before your production actually starts. You really want to be able to play with this equipment, get familiar with it, and know if it's going to work or not for your setup. And you're going to want to do that by planning it out. So set it up at least a few days in advance. So updates should also be done before you get to the set. You don't want to have everything set up and then do the firmware update. You want to have it done beforehand. We're definitely going to dive a little bit more into why further on in the show. Next, once you are on site, you can always decline to accept the update and then do it later after production. This is important. There are several times because we go live weekly, where suddenly we'll have the option to update the firmware or whatever, the program, whatever, on our production gear. If we have a show going live that day, we always say no. Always. And I mean that full-heartedly. And that's because we have a show. If for some reason something gets messed up, now suddenly we can't use that equipment. You want to have it up and ready to go. And you don't want to have to worry about that. You always want to give yourself a few days. And the last one, and probably the most important, is make sure you have the right firmware. Not all products have, even if they're in the same production line, have the same firmware. Some of them have different coding and stuff like that. A great example would be BirdDog. They have the P100 and the P200, some very great cameras that we have here at Videoguys. They take different firmware. You can't put a P100 firmware file on a P200 and vice versa. So it's really important to make sure that you have the right firmware. Moving on, so why is it important to update your gear, to put the most up-to-date firmware on it? Well, one of the biggest reasons is because you gain access to new features. Not to single out BirdDog, but I do want to mention that BirdDog recently did a huge firmware update, and now they have all these color correction tools within their online UI that they'd never had before, and that was because of a firmware update. And even more recently, with a firmware update, you now have free auto tracking capabilities on basically all of their PTZ cameras. Again, that's done via a firmware update. See if that firmware update is appropriate for what you're trying to do within your show or within your production. Next, when there is a new feature you want or need, again, you do that through reading what it is. You need to understand it. And if you don't understand it, feel free to call and ask. Feel free to call and ask. Chances are we're going to know a little bit more about it, and we can certainly find out for you or get you in contact with the right people. You can call us at 800-323-2325. My extension is 1119. You can always reach out to me. I certainly can help you out to the best of my ability. And again, after you've read reviews and seen feedback about this update. User reviews are very important. They are the people using the equipment. They are the people who are implementing the firmware production that the company has released. They're the ones that are going to know, okay, what needs to be improved? Okay, this was fixed. Oh, this is great. Oh, this is terrible. You know, there's a whole smorgasbord of stuff that you can read through user reviews. Moving on. When you should not update. So do not update your equipment right before or during a project. I said that before. I'm not going to dwell on that much longer here. If you have not researched the update, don't just blindly go into a firmware update. Make sure you know what you're getting, understand the reviews, and know if it's going to add something to your production. That's the key portion there. It has to add something to your production. And if you don't know what it will do to your workflow, that's actually really important with NDI. Luckily, NDI fixed a lot of those problems. But I know several people who are still using an NDI 4 workflow because that works for them. They don't want to update to NDI 5. They're still using NDI 4, and it works for them. Now, I'm saying if you can update to NDI 5, certainly do it. That's what we have in this studio. And I've got to say, NDI 5 has certainly made our lives significantly easier. But that's just one of the many examples I've seen of people who have purposefully refused to do a firmware update just because it might mess up their workflow and they're comfortable in their workflow. It's okay to be comfortable in your workflow. So to be clear, every update process is a bit different. Now this is important to understand when it comes to updating the firmware on your product. It's important that you follow the instructions given by the vendor. BirdDog has a detailed PDF within their firmware downloads that goes step by step how to update the firmware within your camera. PTZOptics is another one that has really in-depth instructions on how to update the firmware. Atomos is another one as well. NewTek has great videos, one in which we're going to show you here about how to do it. Follow the instructions step by step. And that's really important. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, we're going to check out probably the most asked update methods here at Videoguys. This certainly is far from all. And I really do apologize if your product is not on this list, but these are the most popular ones that we get here. These are the phone calls we get the most. Starting with, how do you update the BirdDog cameras? Well, BirdDog themselves provided a fantastic video walking step by step through this. This is a cut down version of that. We're definitely going to provide the link to the full demo within the blog post. Usually that blog post goes up about 24 hours after the stream is done because it's got a process. So again, this is just a little taste of what you have to do. So Jim, go ahead and roll the demo.
You'll need a couple of things. You'll need a USB stick, access to the internet, and of course access to your P200 camera. In order to prepare the USB stick, we need to get the latest firmware. To do this, go to the BirdDog website at www.bird-dog.tv. Simply go to the support section and scroll down to firmware updates. In this case, scroll down to the P200. You'll see the folder it creates is called a firmware pack. And in here, we have both the baseboard firmware as well as the main update. The first thing you want to do is identify what version of camera you have. In this case, my camera is an A5. Inside the Step 1 folder, you will find a bin file. Simply drop that HD20 file onto the USB stick and eject it. Plug the USB stick into the upgrade port on the back of the camera. Then remove the power and power the camera back on. For Step 2, you'll need to go to the System menu and choose System Update. Then you choose your file, which will be in the Step 2 folder of the firmware pack we downloaded. And I go to Step 2 and select the FW file to update. I press Update. This process can take about 5 minutes depending on how much it needs to upgrade on your baseboard. Thanks for watching this short video on how to upgrade your firmware on your P200 camera.
All right, now we're going to move on to PTZOptics. Now, with updating the firmware on a PTZOptics camera, there are two steps you want to understand, and I've broken them down into two videos and I'm going to walk you through both of them. The first thing you're going to want to do is download the upgrade tool. And I believe there is a lower third with the link right there. That's the link you go to download it. Now, I'm going to walk you through how to do this, where to go, and what to do step by step right now. All right, so first things first, where you want to go, you're going to want to go to PTZOptics.com/firmware. Scroll down to the upgrade tool. Now, this is something interesting. I think this is just a glitch with PTZ Optics right now, speaking of updates and stuff like that. You're going to want to get Windows 2.7 because when I downloaded Windows V 2.8, it only had the Mac software on there. So I've been using Windows 2.7. I have let them know that that is what's happening. So no doubt that's going to be updated, in which case the process remains the same. You just download Windows 2.8 instead of 2.7. But for this, I'm using 2.7. All you have to do is click it, and it will start downloading. Once it's done downloading, you're going to want to open it, and you're going to want to double-click and extract all. Finish. That'll get done extracting, and now you can go back in there and you can open the update file. And this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to get more into what this does in a little bit, but I wanted to set this first to show you what's going on. Now, to go back to the PowerPoint for a moment, we're going to be moving on to the actual firmware process. Now, I want to also note that PTZ Optics and HuddleCam HD, stuff for like the Simple Track Lite and etc., they have basically the same method for firmware updates. So if you have a HuddleCam HD camera or a PTZ Optics camera, the firmware update process is relatively the same. This is one of the few cases in the industry where that is so. So let me actually show you how to update the firmware on your PTZ Optics camera. So you're going to want to go to, if I could hit the right button, you're going to want to go to PTZOptics.com/latest firmware files. That's where you're going to find all of your firmware. See right here, we'll list all of the different cameras that PTZ Optics has and the firmware associated with them. And now in this example, we're using a 12x NDI camera, so I'm going to want to download the 12x NDI firmware. Once that is done downloading, you're going to want to open the upgrade software. And now this is what I like about this. Sometimes, especially if you're using an NDI workflow, you're going to want to have multiple networks. Here in the studio, we have two basic networks. We have our house network, which actually is connected to the internet so we can stream, and then we have a separate network dedicated to our NDI workflows. In this case, that is the network in which I'm going to search my camera on. You're going to want to make sure that your camera is set to that network either via a static IP address or DHCP. Sounds complicated. I assure you it is not. PTZ Optics has made it extremely easy. So you're going to hit search, and there is my camera. It's right there. That's simple. It popped up. You're going to want to right-click and hit upgrade. Now, in here, this is a step that is also important. On type, you're going to want to make sure it's set to MTD. It was for me by default, but I've seen a couple of people that said it wasn't. You're going to want to make sure that is set to MTD. Now, under load file, that is where you're going to open the download file you got from PTZOptics.com. So I'm going to open it. There is that file. And I'm going to open, put it in there, and hit upgrade. This can take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. It took mine about 15 minutes to go, maybe a little under. But when it's done, you'll see this message pop up. Hit OK. And now your camera is ready to go, and it is updated to the latest firmware. And that's how you do it from PTZ Optics. Moving on. NewTek released a very good demo on how to properly update their TriCaster systems. So if you have a TriCaster system, be it a mini or some of the more advanced ones, they have a video on how to update the firmware on your TriCaster, which is very important because chances are if an NDI gets an update, so will your TriCaster. It's important to kind of keep them the same. But we can't explain it any better than NewTek, so NewTek is going to explain it here. The full video will be in the blog post. Usually that's posted about 24 hours after the blog post goes up. So without further ado, let's play the demo, and away we go.
To update this, I'm going to click on Shutdown, and then I'm going to exit out to my administrator mode, exit all the way out to Windows, and we'll open up Internet Explorer here. Downloads page at newtek.com/downloads, and from here, all you have to do is scroll down the page. In my situation, I have the TriCaster TC1 that I need to update, so click on the Download tab here, and you'll see at the bottom, run that. For the easiest, simple way to update your TriCaster, just go ahead and click Download and Install, and then we'll click Next, License Agreement. We accept. Now for this particular example, I'm going to uncheck all of these except for the software. All right, we'll click Next. So we'll click on I accept the agreement, click Next, and click next to that. Select your default language, and then it will uninstall previous versions and install the newest software. All right, now that the update is complete, you'll be prompted that you're going to be signed out of your TriCaster because it will power down your TriCaster to successfully, fully install all of your software. All right, so I have booted up my TriCaster here, and depending on which software, it might ask you to accept the end user license agreement. So from here, we can check on which version of the software we are currently running by, again, clicking on the Help icon, and then About TriCaster TC1, and boom, it's done.
Moving on. Now I'm going to show you how to update your Atomos device. Now, important to note that with an Atomos device, you're going to want to make sure that your Atomos device is activated. However, if you're interested in firmware updates and want to update the firmware, chances are you've already activated your device. So without further ado, let's get into updating the firmware. Bam. All right, so you're going to want to download the latest firmware. I believe we have a lower third for this. Thank you, Jim, for pulling that up. That is where you're going to want to go to get the latest firmware, and you can actually select which device you want, be it a Ninja V, a Shogun 7, etc., etc. It's going to show you on the drop-down, and the process is relatively the same. In this case, we're looking at a Ninja V Plus, one of their more recent products. And on their website, you're always going to download the latest firmware. The latest firmware is always going to be located towards the top. All you have to do is click Update. That will download. You then have to unzip the file. And you're going to want to copy both areas, be it to activate or the firmware itself, into an empty SSD drive, which I just want to show that completed before we actually show you. Yes, and we actually have a shot of our Ninja V. We have a drive hooked into that. It would look just like that. That SSD drive is what you would put the firmware files onto to get the firmware onto your Ninja V, Shogun 7, etc., etc. You're going to want to make sure to safely eject your media so it doesn't corrupt anything. And now you're going to begin the installing process, which is super easy. With the device turned off, just simply insert the media drive into your Atomos product and power it on. It will automatically start installing the firmware for your Atomos device. Once that's done, you're going to want to power the device on again, and it will be on the latest firmware, and you will see the codes needed to properly activate your firmware and your device. So you kill two birds with one stone in this case. Moving on. Now I'm going to tell you basically how to update your Wirecast gear or software. What's cool about that is it can come in either a hardware form or a software form. The update process is identical. Right now they're on V15 point something. I can't remember the exact number, but this is how you update the firmware for that. Yep. So what you're going to notice is when you open the Wirecast software, you're going to know if there's a new version because it will advertise it on the sidebar. And on this version, you can see it's asking the latest version is now available. You're going to want to click download or install. I'm sorry, I'm going to get that right. I'm going to go back for a second, guys. Sorry. This is live and I want to get it right. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to click upgrade now, which will open a new window. And all you have to do is press download now. That will download the latest version of Wirecast onto your system. Sometimes it takes a little bit to load, and then it will start downloading. Once that is finished, go into your downloads or wherever you wanted to save it to, and just double click it, agree to the terms and conditions, and it will start installing. It will uninstall your previous version and install this newest version. The install is now complete. Finish, open it up, and you will know if you're on the latest firmware because when it's done opening, it will open to this window here. When it's done loading, you'll see it say you have the latest version, and you can now use Wirecast as you see fit. Pretty simple and straightforward. One of the things that I love about software is that they tend to be really simple and straightforward. So interesting that today we got a message on ours saying it's time to upgrade. I'm literally going to show you how easy this is, but when it comes to the YoloBox and updating the firmware on your YoloBox, the YoloBox updates automatically when you're connected to the internet. You will see a message pop up, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. Here's our YoloBox Mini, right here. And as you can see, bright light, bright light. It's got a message that popped up, and it's saying there is a new firmware version available. So all I'm going to do is hit, now let's pull that up, that camera again so people can see it. All I'm going to do is hit install, and it's going to start installing. It is literally that simple when it comes to the YoloBox. And it's the same process, be it a YoloBox Mini, a YoloBox OG, or a YoloBox Pro, which is the big brother to all those units. And that can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. It doesn't take very long at all to update your YoloBox, but same process for all of them. Really is that simple. So I wanted to round this up with what I was just talking about when it comes to firmware. For some tech tips to round this out, all equipment should be set up and tested a few days before the production. You don't want to wait until the day of. Updates should be done before you get to the set. You don't want to go to the set, have everything set up, and then do a firmware update. That could bite you in the butt. Could bite you in the butt, and you don't want that. Once you're on site, you can always decline to accept the update and then do it later after the production. We do that here all the time at Videoguys because we go live twice a week. So we have to always be careful whenever we get a firmware update. And the final one is make sure you have the right firmware. Make sure it's right. You don't want to accidentally brick a unit. I've done that. I did that recently. You don't want to accidentally do that. Always double check you have the right firmware when you're about to update your stuff. Before I leave, I once again want to say that I believe it's due June 12th, but we are doing a giveaway at this moment. If you go to the Videoguys Facebook page, you can see a place where you can sign up and do a giveaway. All you need to do is put in your name and email by clicking the link, and you could win a LaCie Rugged USB-C portable hard drive. This is a giveaway, 100% free. It's 4 terabytes, and this is going through June 12th, is what I was told. Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to reach out to us at 800-323-2325. My extension is 1119. Chances are, if you've called, you've talked to me already. But we are real people, and if we can't help you, we'll definitely get you in contact with the people who can. We're very good at this. So I hope you enjoyed today's show. We're live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And thanks for watching, everybody. See you in the next one. Sayonara.
Videoguys is available Monday through Friday. Give us a call at 1-800-323-2325. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram to stay connected with all of our updates. And you can like us on Facebook. Keep an eye out for our live videos, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.